Good morning, Fort Alliance. Wow, this side has a lot of space. Y'all are packed over here. Interesting. Sorry. Welcome to those of you online. We have room for you. You could come and hang out with us. 9, 15, or 11. It would be great to have you join us. But in the meantime, we're glad this is useful and hope it blesses you in the midst of your day. Next Sunday, anyone know what it is? Advent. It's the beginning of the celebration of Christmas in our church calendar, of the coming of the King. Advent stands for arrival, the arrival of Jesus, and we need your help as we prepare for Advent. So to do this, I'm going to get you to take out your smart devices, and while you get those out and get them ready to make all this happen, turn on the Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff, make sure this is working, I want to add this. We have been working for a while on the Advent season already. Our Christmas Eve service, as you can see, our stage has been extended a little bit to help for that. Huge thank you to our facilities team who came in this past week here and just really helped out, have put in a lot of work. And speaking of our facilities team, you guys, we seriously got like the greatest crew around here. My normal Sunday kind of rhythm and routine is I get in at about 6:30, go through my pre-Sunday morning kind of rhythm and routine of prayer and practice. And I today threw in my best snow shovel because I was certain I was going to have to contribute to the cause. And at 6:30 in the morning, this was already shoveled by our facilities folks. All right? Seriously, you guys, I am so grateful for them. They are working so super hard, I'm grateful. But back to Advent prep and what have you, we need your help in prepping for Advent. And so with your devices, we're going to start a little bit of fun. And we have a little Christmas Eve survey for you. And we are going to start with question number 1. What is your favorite Christmas food, okay? So in case you're not as great with tech as me, you're going to put your photo on that QR. You're not hitting your take a picture button. You are hitting the little link that pulls up. On my iPhone, it's yellow, and it's going to take you to the link, and you are going to pick between Turkland, chocolate, candy cane, Manonorm, or the lechon. I'm not sure I said that right. Did I say that right? Lechon? You had it on our 50th anniversary. It's the roasted pig, okay? There you go. Send those in. I get this. Well, we got way better participation in this service. Yeah! Oh, yeah, let's go. Come on now. Give you a few more seconds on question number 1. Question number 1, okay, favorite Christmas food. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, where are we? What are we at here? What are we doing? Oh, the turkey by a landslide today. Okay, 48, so it's still moving. Oh, this is fancy. Oh, the tech people around here are incredible. Amazing. Okay, now, some of you have yet to pull out your phone, Ken Bergman. Kurt, yeah, I actually need your help. Oh, you got it? My bad. I'm sorry for throwing stones. I picked my stone back up, throw it at myself. All right. Okay. Question number 2, we're getting a little more serious now as we consider Christmas Eve. All right, what should Pastor Ken wear to the Christmas Eve service? Full suit, sweater and khakis, blue jeans and plaid. There we go. Christmas suit, Grinch sweater. Oh my goodness. The first service is crazy like you guys too. Where am I going to get a Christmas suit? This is not in the budget. Wow. Like, what is a Christmas suit? I don't even know. Oh, my word. Wow, you guys are crazy. Okay, so before I get to the third and final question, I just got to preface it a little bit, set the table, help you understand why we are doing this today. We are in a really amazing season. It's a fun season where we just get to see and experience, God just moving and working in our midst. And there is something going on in this area where God is drawing people to himself, where people are finding themselves searching and seeking for the one true living God. And we're experiencing that in many different ways, and it looks at a number of different ways. I'll give you a couple examples, okay? Our Mumco group, they meet on Mondays, all right? They are super strategic about connecting with young moms, whether they're people of faith or not of faith, and they're predominantly people who are just moms who don't have faith in God but are looking for a place to connect. And our Mumco group has their own private little Facebook page that they communicate with moms who follow them in our community, okay? In just Fort Saskatchewan, 400 moms track with our Mumco group. They're following. They're wanting to know what it looks like to connect, to find community. Okay? You got nothing going on Monday morning, I'll show you who to talk to. Okay? They need help with the kids and the little ones that are a part of that, okay? Like, they could really use your help. But Christmas Eve service is one of those services I know they give those moms invites. And they give them the opportunity to come in and to hear and to see what our church is about, to hear the gospel, the good news of who Jesus is, that he's come, and he's come for them to give hope, peace, and life. I have found that in my own journey, like, the easiest service to invite my non-believing friends to is Christmas Eve. Like, it's that one time a year where they're open to coming and gathering with us, even though I tell them you're not that scary. They won't burn when they walk in the door. For some reason, it's Christmas Eve that they're actually willing to come. And a number of you utilize Christmas Eve as the same way, as a means to just build connection and to have conversation with folks about God. Easter is another one of those seasons. Easter is a good example. This Easter, and we had a couple baptisms and it added to it. But in our second service, which many of you were probably here, we had 350 people show up for Easter Sunday. In this room, that fits 200. That's one service. And as exciting as that was in that moment, we were like, afterwards, oh my goodness, that can't happen again. We have to set up systems and structures to help us with that. And one of the reasons you've heard of our tech upgrade that we're working on, we're ironing out kinks, so we can put the service downstairs if we ever have to. But as you all know, like, being up here is different. It's special. There's something about being in the room, isn't there? And so as we looked ahead to Christmas Eve, we felt we needed to try something new, something different in means of the growth we're experiencing as a fellowship. And so we're going to offer 3 Christmas Eve services. One will actually be the day before on the 23rd. That's a Monday at 7 o'clock. And then we'll have 2 Christmas Eve services at our regular times, at least regular since I've been here, although COVID kind of threw a wrench in that, but you know what I mean, at 2 and at 4, okay? And what we're doing right now as a staff is we just want to strategically gather some information and see what service looks like it will be the fullest, so that we can see if we can move some of us around who are willing and able to other services, so we can have the best experience on Christmas Eve as possible, especially for, those ladies at Mumco that might come, the friends that I'm going to invite, the friends you may invite. Like, we want to let them have an experience where they could be in the room. So this is our means of collecting some info so we can make the best strategic decision as a staff. So, thus, I really do need your help. So if you could go to question number 3, all right, in light of everything I just shared, which Christmas Eve service would you like to attend? Be honest, we'll figure out what to do from there, but let us know what you anticipate may be your response, okay? Well, I know. You and the first service, well, I'm not helping in all of them. Just pick one. I get it. We don't have an all of them option. But there are volunteers, by the way. They are working hard already and are working hard over the course of the 23rd and 24th. So I do know that is the case. I'll give you about a few more seconds here to get that info filled in. And then, Jordan, make sure you capture these numbers at the end for us so we can plan accordingly. And let's go ahead, Jordan. Bring that up when you're ready. Oh, all right. Okay. Not bad. Kind of a, 60, 33, 30. Okay. Good to know. Perfect. A couple more. Bring it in. Jordan's capturing that info for me. Perfect. Thank you for participating. Christmas is coming. Advent starts next week. That's the coming of the King, which leads me to today, where we get to consider and look at our 11th and our final point in our statement of faith, which is the return of the King. I'm also referred to as the second coming of Jesus. And as some of you like to converse and talk about it, yes, we are talking about the end times today. As we come to the second coming of Jesus, the return of the kings, I just want to share a couple things as some preamble. I think it's important to establish this before we dig in, and we're going to dig today, okay? So first, you need to know that I am not a scholarly theologian really on anything, but in particular this, okay? Now, I have studied, I have gone to school, I've worked through this, but I am not a scholar. I know enough to know when I'm talking with a scholar. I'm able to converse with a scholar. If I really want, which I rarely do, could debate with a scholar, but I'll probably lose. And as I often share with our staff, I am much more of what I would call a pastoral theologian. What I mean by that is what I am most intrigued by and enjoy when it comes to studying the Bible and understanding God is how does what we are studying practically impact us? How does what we are learning actually become something that we put into practice? Now, scholarly theologians are important, and the study of things for knowledge matters, but for me, I just am far more intrigued by how things affect my heart, my soul, and how that is then lived out. And so I just want to be honest about that before we fully get going into this. So with that said, we come to the 11th, the final point of our statement of faith, which is about the second coming of Christ, and it reads like this. The second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ is imminent and will be personal and visible. And the believer's blessed hope, this vital truth, is an incentive for holy living and sacrificial service toward the completion of Christ's commission. Now, as we get going, for the first half of our time, I want to cover three different common views. There are other views, and there's kind of nuances to each of these views, but I want to cover three different common views that are held to or believed in the church today. Some of you here right now have come here and you already have very strong, rooted opinions on the second coming, the end times. And I just want you to know that's okay. Others of you are coming and are gathering here today, and you have probably never heard of these three views. You've never even heard of some of the words that I'm about to use when it comes to the return of the King or the second coming of Jesus. And I want you to know that is okay. It's okay. In fact, there are people in our fellowship with all three of these views. I have friends who are pastors who hold to all three of these views. And I would let any of those friends that I'm thinking of as I consider this speak from this very pulpit or this iPad. Because that's okay. The one thing in the midst of these views and the different opinions and understandings and interpretations of Scripture in regards to the return of the King, the second coming, the one thing that I am certain of is Jesus is coming again. I'm certain he's coming again. And so in the midst of the first half of this sermon where we consider these views, and perhaps there's nuances that you hold to that are slightly different, or even perhaps there's a fourth or a fifth or a sixth that you feel more leaning to, I just want you to know this. In this church, we will not divide over the different views around the second coming of Jesus. It's okay that there's different views. And as I'll point out, we'll look at the same text to explain that all three views get these, their understanding from the same verses. So it's okay. So, with that in mind, let's dig a little and consider this point 11, the second coming of Jesus, the return of the King, or the end times. We were joking in pre-rehearsal meetings that I need a voice effect too, not just the vocalists. I think that would have been the appropriate time for it. Anyways, I want to take you, to two passages to just set the table. From there, I'm going to take us to Matthew 24, and we're going to spend all our time there, okay? So if you're, I want to turn once in my Bible and follow along, Matthew 24. If you want to turn a couple times, you can join me right now, or just read along on the screen, as I'm going to take us to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 to 18. This is one of the first and most important passages, although there's many, about the second coming of Jesus, and I just want to read it for you as we get going. It reads like this. And now, dear brothers and sisters, we want you to know what will happen to the believers who have died, so that you will not grieve like people who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and was raised to life again, we also believe that when Jesus returns, all right, topics at hand, it's on the table right now. We also believe that when Jesus returns, God will bring back with him the believers who have died. Let's hit pause. Let's go back to last week. We talked about this, the resurrection, that in the Christian faith from the Scriptures, we understand, we know, we believe that there is life after death. This is speaking of this bodily resurrection I was talking about last week. I'm not going to give the whole spiel. That's last week's message. But this is what we're talking about. There's this bodily resurrection that is yet to come, and it's to happen when Jesus returns, okay? So that gives a little more context on last Sunday. Goes on. 15. We tell you this directly from the Lord. We who are still living when the Lord returns will not meet him ahead of those who've died. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven, and with a commanding shout, and with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God. First, the Christians who have died will rise from the grave. Then, together with them, we who are still alive will remain on the earth, will be caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Then we will be with the Lord forever. So encourage each other with these hope. So there's incredible hope around the second coming, the return of the Lord for us who believe. And this passage is speaking to that. Now, another passage I need to take us to help kind of set the table for the initial conversation we're going to have about three different views is in Revelation chapter 20. And so I'm going to take us to Revelation chapter 20. We're going to kind of see the continuation of the subject for the day in verses 1 to 6, okay? So Revelation 20, verses 1 to 6. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven with the key to the bottomless pit and a heavy chain in his hand. He seized the dragon, that old serpent, who is the devil, Satan, and bound him in chains for 1,000 years. This term, 1,000 years, is really important in the rest of this passage, and we're going to come back to it, so take note of it. The angel threw him into the bottomless pit, which he then shut and locked so that Satan could not deceive the nations anymore until the 1,000 years were finished. Afterward, he must be released for a little while. Then I saw thrones, and the people sitting on them had been given the authority to judge. I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their testimony about Jesus and for proclaiming the word of God. They had not worshipped the beast or his statue, nor accepted his mark on their foreheads or their hands. They all came to life again. That sounds familiar. Remember 1 Thessalonians 4. And they reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. This is the first resurrection. The rest of the dead did not come back to life until the 1,000 years had ended. Blessed and holy are those who share in this first resurrection. For them, the second death holds no power, and they will be priests of God and of Christ, and will reign with him 1,000 years. So, this 1,000-year period that you hear brought up in this passage in Revelation 20 is referred to by the scholars as the millennium. Okay? Millennium, 1,000 years, okay? And this 1,000-year millennium, okay, so this millennium or this millennial reign of Jesus is really important to understanding the three different views. Okay? We recognize that Jesus, we know this, scriptures are clear, is coming again. But the understanding amongst different people within the church is that this millennial reign could possibly look different between these views. For some, this millennial reign that we're talking about right here, this return of the King, the second coming of Jesus, is an event that is yet to happen, and it will be literal. There will be a literal 1,000 years that takes place on this earth, and that Jesus will reign and rule in the midst of it. Then after, Jesus will set up a new heaven, a new earth, where we will worship him forever and serve him forever. Now for others, this millennial reign of Jesus, this 1,000 years we see written of here, is a symbol. It's a symbol of a really long time, and this symbol, in their opinion, is that it is happening right now, that we are living in this reign, this millennial reign of Jesus, even now. And I want to explain that view and two other views. So, first view of the three, I'll call them most common views in regards to understanding the second coming, the return of Jesus, or the end times, is called an amillennial view. Okay? So this view holds to a position that we are currently in the millennial reign of Christ. Jesus is reigning in this millennial reign right now, and doing so in a spiritual or a heavenly reign, or a heavenly way. This 1,000 years that we see in Revelation is therefore obviously symbolic for this view of a long period of time, a time that we're in right now. Now, this view was held as early as Augustine in the late 300s. And it's also been held by some like heavy hitter, like scholarly theologians like John Calvin and Martin Luther. Now, I share that because some of you here, and I know this because we've gotten to know each other, right, are like me. You grew up in the church and in this environment like I did in the 80s and in the 90s, and you were, if like me in churches like that I was growing up in, you never ever heard of this view. But it goes back a long time, and it has some really, really incredible believers who have tracked along with it. Now, what's really important to understand about this view is that it came upon the heels of Emperor Constantine coming into power. And Emperor Constantine in the 300s legalized Christianity. Now, that might sound like, okay, whatever, legalized Christianity. But this is really important in the 300s. And here's why. Because before that, there was incredible, absolutely horrendous persecution of the early church and the Christians who lived in those first couple hundred years. I mean, I'm talking about like Christians being staked from one end and out the other and just left there to die. I'm talking about like Christians who were persecuted in such a way that they were like sawed in half. I'm talking about believers who would come to previous emperors, not Emperor Constantine, and they would be turned into human candles where they would be wrapped with wax, have their hair lit on fire, and would become living, burning human torches because they refused to turn away from the message of Jesus. I'm talking about horrific persecution, things that we, thank God, do not understand in Canada. That was what was going on amongst the early church and the believers. And so to have Emperor Constantine come into power and legalize Christianity, change this reality, was really important. And so this view goes back a long time, and it kind of comes back and comes out of this historical reality. Now, a couple more things that are important to understand from this view. Because of the cross, right, Jesus' death, burial, resurrection, Jesus has regained our authority from Satan and bound him spiritually as a result. And through his church, Jesus is reigning now, thus the symbolic nature of the millennial reign. And the church has authority through Jesus. Then one day, Jesus will visibly come and bring about the new heaven and the new earth as it leads us into eternity. That's view number one. View number 2, and 3 for that matter, hold to a more literal understanding of this 1,000 years. They believe that it is 1,000 years that will be actually 1,000 years where Jesus actually reigns on earth, and it is yet to come. The first view that I'm speaking of is the historical premillennial view. Now, it holds the position that the millennium is still to come. This 1,000 years that we just read of in Revelation is still to come, and that Christ will one day reign on earth for the literal 1,000 years. This view was the view of many in the early church. The church had been established by Jesus to advance his kingdom, and yet faced and still faces, as we just talked about too, right, persecution as we do so. The church faced tribulation then and now. Again, we should be grateful we live here, because there are other places in the world where this doesn't happen like this. Like, we are blessed. Okay? The church faced tribulation both then and now. And there will be a time of a great tribulation that is coming. It's often thought to be a period of 7 years. The Antichrist will reign during this great tribulation. Jesus will return to end this great tribulation. And upon his return, all who have died in him will be raised. We read of that as well. Jesus will then set up a literal kingdom here on earth, and he will reign for 1,000 years. After that, Jesus will bring about a new heaven, a new earth, and lead us from there into eternity. And finally, there's a dispensational view. Now, this view, in circles that some of you are familiar with, that I know I am familiar from the years of growing up, often talk about the dispensational view as a pre-tribulation view, meaning that there's this removal of the church, aka, if you're familiar with this, a rapture, which happens before the tribulation, and then before, as well as obviously before the millennium. So it's a pre-tribulation, a premillennial view, and it's summarized by this word as a dispensational view. Let me explain this one. So this view holds the position that the millennium is still to come. It will be a literal 1,000 years. The key premise of the dispensational view that I just kind of highlighted really quick is that God will deal with the church and Israel separately. This view began to take root in the 1800s via John Darby's publication of the Schofield Study Bible, and this view is one of the most common views in the Western church today. It's not very common around the world. It's incredibly common in the Western church in Canada and the US, okay? Again, if you were like me, you were a 90s child, it was made very well known in the series Left Behind. If you know what I'm talking about, you know, and if you don't, that's fine. You may or may not missing out. I don't want to play my cards right now, so yeah. This view holds to a time of a great tribulation of 7 years that is coming, and that, as I already established, the church will be raptured out of that prior to that 7 years. God will deal with Israel in the meantime. This tribulation will be for the entire earth, and it will include the reign of the Antichrist. After this, Jesus will return. He will set up his millennial kingdom on earth for a literal 1,000 years. And after that, Jesus will bring about the new heaven and the new earth and lead us into eternity. So view 1, it's symbolic, a lot of metaphor. View 2 and 3, a literal 1,000-year reign on earth, but with a differing understanding of if the church will go through that period or not. All that said, again, I'm going to go back to what's most important to understand what we know for certain is that Jesus is coming. And as a means to help us kind of see a little bit about those three views and what's going on as we consider the return of Christ, the second coming, aka the end times, I will now take us to Matthew chapter 24. It just seemed like it made the most sense to me. If we're going to consider this point of our statement of faith and consider all these things, we have already established that Jesus is, yes, fully human, but he is also fully God. And so it felt like if we're going to consider this, let's just listen to what Jesus had to say about it. Allow that to guide us for the rest of the day. And so we come to 24. Now, 24 is a long chapter, okay? We'll touch on 25 in a moment, too. It's a long chapter. I am not reading the whole of 24 and 25. For those of you who love this subject, and listen, it's okay if you do. I had a season where I was enthralled with this subject. Like, it was the only thing I wanted to talk about. You put your bookmark there, and you take this home, and you read what Jesus said later, okay? And if you were hoping for a little more scholarly input, because I'm done my scholarly part now I'm going to the pastor part of this, all right? And you're like, oh, I really wanted him to take that further. You can come talk to me. I got books. I got names of authors on all three of those views, and you can study for yourself and enjoy that and go deeper into that. But at this point, we move to the words of Jesus to help guide the conversation as we understand these three views and then into their application. So, 24 verse 1 starts out like this, 1 and 2. As Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, his disciples pointed out to him the various temple buildings. But he responded, "Do you see all these buildings? I tell you the truth. They will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another." Now, this passage, this introduction, is really important, especially for those who hold to view one, the symbolic view. Because everything that we are about to read, they suggest, is linked to this introduction in verse 1 and 2. And they would tell you, and this is true, that the events of chapter 1 and 2, in their opinion, happened in 70 AD. Because in 70 AD, Rome attacked Jerusalem and ransacked the Temple Mount and destroyed the temple and all of its buildings, and it's still destroyed today. And in that moment, when Rome attacked and ransacked, they set themselves up there and proclaimed, "Look, see, we are the rulers, the one true God or gods, whom you are to bow and to worship." And so the view number one links to this verse and said, this is a historical prophecy now. It's already been fulfilled. Jesus spoke this around, that 33-ish, a little bit earlier, perhaps 32 AD, and it was fulfilled in 70. It's a historical event. You can Google that. Just don't believe everything you read on Google, okay? But you'll see what I mean. 70 AD, the fall of Jerusalem, the temple and all its buildings, ransacked, demolished, just like Jesus said they would be. Okay? Moving on. Verse 3 reads like this. Later, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately and said, Tell us when will all this happen? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world? Now, this is where view number 2 and 3 step in, and they say, okay, yes, there is historical prophecy to what Jesus was speaking, because 70 AD did happen. But clearly, in their view, this isn't all fulfilled. It's a dual prophecy, both historical and something yet to come, and they would suggest that because the end of the world has not yet happened because we're still here, right? So, same introduction, 3 views, right? Let's fast forward. Let's go to verse 14. Now, this doesn't really apply to the message at hand, but this is like the Alliance verse, okay? So because we are an Alliance church, a part of Alliance Canada, I really got to just touch on this briefly, or I'm not doing like my other pastoral friends and buddies, good honor. So it reads like this. The good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world so that all the nations will hear it, and then the end will come. This verse is critical in the Alliance. It was a part of our founder's kind of DNA that drove him to be the Christian and missionary alliance. Because he wanted to do our part in bringing about the return of Jesus. If the return of Jesus hinged on all the world hearing, then let's go make sure that all the world has held. And so even today, as the Alliance Canada and the Alliance World Fellowship is making decisions about where to send missionaries or IWs, they will only send them to the least reached people groups in the world. They will not go to places where there's anywhere greater than 2% of the population who've already heard the gospel. In the Alliance, we will only go where less than 2% have heard. It links to this verse, that all the world will hear, so that then Jesus will return. So now that I did my Alliance buddies their due diligence, we continue. Verse 15 becomes a really important kind of segue verse for us. It reads like this, and all 3 views understand this different. The day is coming when you will see what Daniel the prophet spoke about, the sacrilegious object that causes desecration standing in the holy place. Reader, pay attention. Now, view 1 has 2 kind of potential understandings of this. So view 1, the symbolic view or the amillennial view, would read this and say, this has already happened in 70 AD. Rome has already come to the Temple Mount, destroyed it, set up camp, and said, look, we're God, bow. So it's fulfilled. Some amillennialists will also suggest maybe this is speaking of Jesus' death on the cross, because the cross where Jesus was crucified was right next to the Temple Mount. And to have the living God bear the sin of the world so that we could be in relationship with him is an abomination, that he would have to do that for us. That said, the second and the third view believe that this is yet to happen. That there is a day that is yet to come when the Temple Mount will be restored, and then the Antichrist will come and desecrate it with his presence and tell the world to worship him from that place. So, remember what I said? There's 3 views, and holding different views is okay. We're using the same verse, and it's understood in like 3 different ways. There's complexity in this, okay? It's okay. Most important part I come back to is Jesus is what? Coming again. All right, let's keep going. Okay, 16 to 22 now. This is a passage that really the second view holds to, okay? This is the historical premillennial view. It really anchors in their view more. It reads like this: then those in Judea must flee to the hills. A person out on the deck of a roof must not go down to the house to pack. A person out in the field must not return even to get their coat. How terrible it will be for pregnant women and for nursing mothers in those days. And pray that your flight will not be in winter or on the Sabbath, for there will be greater anguish than at any time since the world began, and it will never be so great again. In fact, unless that time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive, but it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. So Jesus in this passage is painting this picture of great anguish, of incredible tribulation, of trials that are to come. So great the world has never experienced it. And woe to us who are in this time, because we need to just run, flee, hide in the midst of these days, because it will be so horrible for those who stick around and endure. Again, if you too would read this and use this as a passage to give reason and backing to why they believe what they believe. Fast forwarding a little bit more, we come to verse 36 to 42. This now is where the third view will come as they read through this passage and say, see, look at this. This appears to me now as though this has not only not yet come, that there is a prevention of God's people going through this time of great tribulation. Let me read it for you. 36, however, no one knows the day or the hour when these things will happen, not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself. Only the Father knows. When the Son of Man returns, the Son of Man is a name Jesus uses for himself. This is really important. When the Son of Man returns, it will be like it was in Noah's day. In those days before the flood, the people were enjoying banquets and parties and weddings right up into the time Noah entered his boat. People didn't realize what was going to happen until the flood came and then swept them all away. That is the way it will be when the Son of Man comes. 2 men will be working together in the field. One will be taken, the other left. 2 women will be grinding flour at the mill. One will be taken, the other left. So you too must keep watch, for you don't know what day your Lord is coming. So here, you come to that third view, that dispensational view. This is where they would say, see, look, there's this taking away of the people of God before this coming of judgment and of tribulation. As I started, all 3 views are using the same text to communicate what they believe, why they believe it. And this, in church environments, can become challenging. Which is why I said to you, it's okay. That's why I said to you, in this church, we won't divide. We won't fight over these three differing views or perhaps other little mini nuances or fourth view or fifth view. Instead, what we will focus on is after we've understood a little of this and maybe developed our opinions, we will remember that we know that Jesus was clear. He is coming again. And in verse 44, Jesus begins to segue for us. He says this in 44, "You must be ready all the time. For the Son of Man will come when is least expected." You must be ready. So the question for the last portion of our morning is this: are you ready? Jesus is clear. He is coming. He's coming again. The return of the King will happen. And he asks you, not me. Jesus himself asks you, are you ready? Now, when I am hanging out in the scholarly theologian circles, they love to sit and dwell on Matthew 24 because there's all these nuances and all these things that you can argue about and try to understand and what have you, and they just go at it over that. But Jesus is only half done here. Now, I don't have my red letter Bible open today, but I'm trusting maybe some of you do. If you have your red letter Bible, what do you notice happens between 24 and 25? He just keeps going. This is the same sermon, same message, same speech, whatever you're comfortable calling it. This is the same. This is one incredibly long teaching, and 25 is just as important as 24. And 25 is where we hear the heart of a pastor, a heart of Jesus, the heart of Jesus as we move into how this really does impact us. Are you ready? Jesus continues from here, and he moves, as he so often does, into three stories. Two of them are parables. Gives accounts and images to tell us about what's happening or going to happen at the time in which he returns. And he wants to make sure that we're capable of answering that question, are you ready? He starts off with a parable of 10 bridesmaids. And he makes it really clear to them that they are to keep watch for the groom. Now, there's some cultural things going on in the midst of the story. I'll save you from that in this moment. But these 10 bridesmaids are waiting for a groom. And they have these lamps that they're to use to keep lit as a means to just show they're ready for the groom's return. But like a typical guy, he's running behind. I'm sorry, Jesus, for making fun of you. Please forgive me. I think Jesus jokes around too. You all know that about me. The groom takes longer than is expected. Now, 5 of these bridesmaids, they're ready. They have extra oil. They're prepared. They want to make sure that they're alert and they're keeping watch. But the other 5 don't have extra oil. And when the groom takes longer, they have to leave. They have to go looking for more oil. And when the groom finally comes, whom we see really clearly in just a moment as a picture of Jesus, only 5 go off with him. Jesus summarized this account in verse 13 of 25. So you too must keep watch, for you do not know the day or the hour, and he personalizes it, of my return. So if Jesus is the groom, my return. Who are the bridesmaids? Us? Are you ready? Are you keeping watch, as he's asked? Do you have what you need prepared and ready for his return? Jesus starts off gentle. He's kind like that. But this is serious stuff, so he continues with another account. And he tells the account of 3 servants while they are awaiting the coming of a man or a master going on a long journey. And with these 3 servants, he gives one of them 5 bags of silver. Tells him to use this for me, my benefit, my kingdom. That servant takes that 5 bags of silver and doubles it, invests it. The second servant, he gives 2 bags of silver, as a means to take that, invest that, to use that for the sake of his kingdom. And then he says, use this for me, and I'll come. And that second one with 2 bags, they come back and they meet the master when he comes back. And he says, here, now I have 4. He doubles it, or they double it. And then finally, there's one servant who's given 1 bag of silver, and the master, the man on the mission says, take this, use this, and when I come back, we'll give account. And that servant with the 1 bag is worried about what will happen if he mishandles it or if he, inappropriately uses it. So he just takes that bag of silver and buries it and hides it. And then when the master comes, he says, I was worried about what you would do or say, so I just didn't do anything. I just kind of hid that in the background. Well, to the one with 5 who invested it, Jesus, in his account here, verse 21 says this: the master was full of praise. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with handling this small amount. Now I will give you many more responsibilities. I like this. Let's celebrate together. We had a little one in the first service who was like, yeah. I was like, preach it, little sister. You got this. Let's celebrate together. Well done. Well, the second one, likewise, brings the second one, shows the what's come of it. And Jesus or the master, says this in 23. The master said, well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount. Now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. To the final. To the one who just took the bag of silver and buried it. Jesus continues on in 28 and says this. Then he, the master, ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one with 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Verse 30. Now throw this useless servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The scriptures are very, very clear. Jesus is coming again. And Jesus asks you, are you ready? And Jesus tells us in the first account, the bridesmaid account, to keep watch, to be prepared. And then he says, look, there will be some who I look upon and I will say, well done. But there will be others whom I say, throw this useless servant away. All my hope and my prayer is on the day that Jesus returns, whatever and however that looks and happens, that it might be said of every one of us, well done. And not throw this useless servant away. Jesus wraps up with a final illustration, an illustration often called the parable of the sheep and the goats. But it's not just a parable, it's so much more, because Jesus starts off this account, the story of the sheep and goats, like this. He says, but when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and the Son of Man is a name for who? Jesus. Yes. When the Son of Man comes in all his glory, all the angels with him, he will sit upon his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep at his right hand, and the goats at his left. To the sheep on his right. In 34, he will say this. The king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who were blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world." But to the goats, whom were on his left, who refused to participate in the caring for, the hurting, the hopeless, and the lost. Jesus, in 45, says this. And he will answer, "I tell you the truth, when you refuse to help the least of my brothers and sisters, you were refusing to help me." And they, if you read the whole account in context, they, the goats whom are on the left, will go away into eternal punishment. But the righteous, the sheep, who are on the right, will go into eternal life. Jesus, in 25, becomes an incredible pastoral theologian. He asks you, Jesus himself asks you, "Are you ready?" And then he invites you to keep watch. And after inviting you to keep watch, he makes it clear that his heart is his hope that one day he might say over you, "Well done." But if not, Jesus will say, "Throw this servant away." Jesus will say to those who he welcomes in, "Welcome into eternal life." But to those who reject him, to those who refuse to participate, who refuse to be ready, he says, "Away into eternal judgment." Not me. Jesus asks you this morning, are you ready? Because he is coming again. And there is a reason why for 5 years straight, on almost every single message I have preached with you, I have said, if you have yet to be right with Jesus, it starts like this, by coming to him and saying, "Jesus, I am sorry. Jesus, will you forgive me?" And then, "Jesus, my life is yours." Each of us wrestle with our own flesh. It's all too easy to bow to the throne of my own self and fulfill my own desires, my own wants. And in doing so, I reject God and who he truly is, the one true living God. Each of us wrestled through that. As a result, we walk away from God, but God did not want us to be separated from him. He wanted us to draw us to himself and ensure there was a way for us to know him. So Jesus, God, took on flesh and took on my sin. He took on your sin, and he went to the cross that we've talked about, and he paid for that sin that you could be forgiven. And relationship with him, right standing with him, knowing that initially you are ready, begins by saying, "Jesus, I am sorry. Jesus, will you forgive me?" And then I always tag that third part, "My life is yours." I do that because Jesus is the Lord, and he invites us into a relationship where we join with him and what he's doing in his kingdom, and we serve him. Part of that is keeping watch. Part of that is investing the gifts he's given. And he invites us to participate in what he's a part of. And we may not perfectly do that on day one, and I know we'll not perfectly, but we grow little by little, day by day. We've talked about that in this series as we come to know him more. And so we say, "Jesus, thank you for giving your life to me. Now here, I give you mine." If you sit here today, if you're listening even right now, you can know you're ready for the coming of the King, the return of the King, the second coming, by coming and bowing before Jesus and saying, Jesus, I am sorry. Jesus, will you forgive me? Now, Jesus, my life is yours. Are you ready? Are you keeping watch? Are you using what he's gifted you to use for his kingdom? May it be said of all of us, well done. It begins by humbling yourself and coming before him. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Jesus, I'm sorry. Jesus, forgive me. My life is yours. I've asked Amber and Julianne to sing over you as you consider all that Jesus spoke on this. Just listen in. Consider these things and what your response might be.